The beat echoed low through the studio walls, like a heartbeat trying to be heard through layers of concrete. Broadus stood there, his palms slightly damp, eyes locked on the blinking red light that signaled recording. It was more than just a track. It was his voice, his pain, his story. And today someone with real power would listen. He had rehearsed this moment countless times. In front of mirrors in his car, during late-night walks through Long Beach. Now he was here inside one of LA's most prestigious studios, waiting for his shot with producer Trey Delano, a name known for turning whispers into stars. But the man behind the name carried a presence colder than the marble floors beneath Corde's feet. Trey entered the room without fanfare. His expression unreadable, his eyes tired and uninterested. He sat down, motioned vaguely for the track to play, and leaned back in his chair. No handshake, no introduction, just silence and judgment. Corde hit play. The music filled the space. Slow, deliberate chords layered with his voice, raw and full of emotion. The lyrics painted scenes of identity struggles, of trying to honor a legacy while forging his own. 30 seconds in, Trey raised a hand and pressed stop. "That's enough," the producer said flatly. Corde blinked, unsure if he misheard. "I get it," Trey continued, his tone coated in condescension. "You're Snoop's kid. You think pain makes you authentic. But this," he scoffed, "it's a demo. Not even a good one." The room shrank. Corde felt his chest tighten. Trey leaned forward. "If your name was James from Ohio, I wouldn't even let you in here. You want real advice? Go be an influencer. Post some fit pics. Don't waste people's time pretending to be a rapper." Corde stood frozen. Humiliation clawed at his throat, but anger burned behind it. Still, he said nothing. He simply gathered his things and left, the sound of Trey's chair squeaking behind him like a final insult. Outside, the LA sun felt different, harsher, unforgiving. His phone buzzed. Messages from friends, a text from his little brother, and one from his father. How'd it go? He didn't answer. That night in his apartment, Corde sat alone in the dark. The city lights blinked outside, but they felt far away. In his mind, Trey's words looped endlessly. Go be an influencer. Don't waste people's time. Was that how the world saw him? A spoiled kid trying to cosplay struggle? He picked up his phone again. This time he called the one person who would understand. Snoop's voice came through, calm and warm. "What's up, champ?" Corde didn't even try to hide the frustration in his tone. He recounted everything, Trey's dismissal, the humiliation, the doubt creeping in like smoke. His father listened in silence. Then, slowly, Snoop chuckled. "Man, they told me the same thing, way back when, said I was just another dude with braids and a deep voice, that I'd never sell a record." Corde sighed. "But you proved them wrong. And so will you," Snoop said. "But not by being me, not by chasing their approval. You gotta make them come to you. But first, you gotta believe you're worth the chase." That night, something shifted. Corde sat at his keyboard and played. He didn't write for Trey, or the labels, or the critics. He wrote for himself, for the kid who used to freestyle in the back of class, for the boy who watched his dad battle through rejection with grace and grit. This wasn't the end. It was just the start of something louder. Corde couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, Trey's voice haunted him, condescending, final, dismissive. The insult wasn't just about the music. It was about who he was, who people thought he could never be. It wasn't the first time someone accused him of riding on his father's coattails, but it was the first time it cut this deep. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror, staring into his own reflection. For the first time in a while, he didn't see potential, he saw doubt. Did Trey have a point? Was his music really just another echo of a famous name? He needed air. Driving with no destination, he ended up in Long Beach, the same neighborhood where his father once built his empire. He parked and wandered the streets until he found himself outside an old studio his dad used in the early days. It was boarded up now, forgotten like so many dreams that never got past the door. That night, he sat across from Snoop at his home, the silence between them filled with unspoken weight. The living room, filled with platinum records and photos of legends, didn't feel inspiring. It felt like a wall he'd never climb. "You ever think I'm just a shadow?" Corde finally asked, his voice low. Snoop looked at him carefully. "You're not my shadow. You're my legacy. But you gotta decide what kind of legacy you want to be." Corde clenched his jaw. "I don't want help, I want to earn it." "That's why you'll make it," Snoop said. "But this game, it'll chew you up if you're not ready. The moment you let them define you, they own your story." Those words stuck with him. Over the next few days, Corde went silent on social media. He ignored texts, calls, even offers. He needed space, not from the world but from the noise inside his head. He started writing again, this time without overthinking rhyme schemes or trends. He wrote about pressure, about being underestimated, about wanting to break free from a last name that opened doors but also caged him in. He began laying down tracks alone, raw, imperfect, but honest. There were no auto-tuned hooks or chart-chasing beats, just verses wrapped in truth and delivered with a voice that carried the weight of both hunger and pain. Still, the sting of Trey's rejection lingered. It wasn't about fame. It was about respect, about not being seen as a novelty act born of nepotism. So he made himself a vow. He would make an album. No features, no hype, just him. A body of work that told the world who Broadus really was, without the shadow, without the shortcut. He sold a few of his sneakers to rent studio time in a quieter part of town. The place wasn't fancy, just a booth, a mic, and a cracked screen that barely showed levels, but it felt right. It was stripped down like him. The hunger was back. Every night, he crafted. Beats, lyrics, layers of sound that echoed his truth. Slowly, a vision began to form. This wasn't just music anymore, it was therapy, resistance, rebirth. One night, after hours in the booth, he played back a rough cut of a new track. As he listened, his eyes welled up. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. For the first time, he didn't sound like someone trying to be accepted. He sounded like someone who no longer cared. And that was the first step toward becoming undeniable. Corde needed distance, not just from LA, but from the expectations stitched into every conversation, every handshake, every glance that hinted he hadn't earned his place. So he packed a duffel, left a note for his mother, and caught a bus to Oakland. No press, no entourage. Just a backpack full of notebooks and beats burned onto a USB. Oakland's rhythm was different, gritty, soulful, unfiltered. The city pulsed with energy born of resilience and revolution. Here, music wasn't about branding, it was about survival. He found a couch to crash on through a friend of a friend, then walked the streets each day with headphones on and verses bouncing in his head. Word spread. Quietly at first, that Snoop Dogg's son was in town, recording with unknowns in makeshift studios and ciphering at underground sessions. Some expected arrogance, others expected industry polish. Instead, they met a young man who showed up early, stayed late, and listened more than he spoke. At a rundown community center in East Oakland, Corde joined a local workshop for young MCs. No one treated him special. That was the point. One night during an open mic, someone handed him the mic. He hesitated for half a second, then delivered a freestyle that left the room in silence. No hooks, no name drops, just bars that spoke of rejection, of pressure, of becoming. Someone recorded it. The clip hit social media, and within hours, it started spreading. No title. Just raw footage of a young artist spitting truth with nothing but a hoodie and passion. People didn't recognize him at first, but when they did, the reaction split. Some praised his authenticity. Others accused him of performing pain for clout. "Rich kid wants street cred," one comment read. But beneath the noise, a core audience began to form. Listeners who didn't care about his last name. They heard the vulnerability, the hunger, the fire. His following grew, not in explosive numbers, but steadily, genuinely. Back in LA, Snoop watched from a distance. He hadn't reached out in weeks, letting Corde find his own rhythm. What Corde didn't know was that his father had been quietly funding studio hours through a burner account, making sure he had space to create without ever feeling indebted. In the midst of this quiet rise, a new ally emerged. Nia Vale, a rising music journalist from Oakland, had been covering underground scenes for years. She saw the clip, felt the weight of the words and reached out, not with an interview request but with an offer. "I believe in what you're doing," she told him, sitting across from him at a coffee shop near Lake Merritt. "Not because of your name, because of your voice." She offered to document his journey, not to craft a narrative but to capture the real one. Corde hesitated, weary of narratives shaped by others, but Nia's approach was different. She didn't want headlines. She wanted truth. Over the next weeks, Nia followed him as he recorded, performed, rewrote verses, and struggled through doubt. Her lens wasn't flattering, it was honest. And through her writing, people began to see him not as a son trying to imitate a legend, but as a man trying to become one. With every session, Corde's confidence grew. His lyrics cut deeper, his delivery sharpened. The boy who had once flinched under Trey Delano's judgment now stood taller, not because he had something to prove, but because he had already proven something to himself. The city didn't change him, it revealed him. By late summer, the buzz around Corde had reached a new level. What began as whispers in underground circles had grown into real momentum. Not viral stunts or headline drama, just word of mouth and raw respect. And that's when the call came in. A major music festival in Northern California had an opening on its lineup. A primetime slot had unexpectedly opened, and the organizers wanted someone fresh, someone real, someone who could deliver more than just performance, but presence. Corde said yes. When he arrived at the festival grounds, the energy was electric. He wasn't the headliner. He wasn't even printed on the posters. But word spread fast backstage that Snoop Dogg's son, the Corde Broadus, was about to touch the mic, and not the way anyone expected. Backstage, nerves swirled, but Corde was calm. He wore no flashy designer gear, just a black tee, jeans, and a chain his mother gave him at graduation. The crowd outside was restless, not quite sure what to expect. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was polite, curious, even skeptical. Phones were raised, but the vibe was uncertain. Then the beat dropped. He opened with "Pressure Don't Break Me," a track he'd written in Oakland, born from everything he'd endured. The first verse was tight, measured, but by the second his voice cracked with emotion. He wasn't performing, he was confessing. Silence spread through the crowd, not from disinterest but reverence. Then slowly it turned. Applause swelled. Cheers erupted. By the time he reached the final chorus, thousands were chanting the hook with him. And then, something no one expected. From the edge of the stage, a familiar figure appeared. Snoop. The roar was instant. Corde glanced sideways, stunned, but his father didn't grab the mic. He just nodded, and then joined in on the final verse, unannounced, unrehearsed. Their voices blended, two generations stitched together not by fame, but by fight. It wasn't a performance, it was a coronation. The clip hit the internet within minutes. Headlines scrambled to keep up. Corde Broadus breaks free. The legacy evolves. Snoop and son reignite hip-hop's soul. Backstage, Trey Delano stood watching. No VIP pass, no entourage, just a man with arms crossed and a look he rarely wore: regret. He hadn't come to support, he'd come to scout. Rumors of Corde's rise had reached his ears, and now, watching from the shadows, he realized what he'd missed. The voice he dismissed as a novelty had become a movement. Later that night, Trey tried to reach out. A DM. A number passed through a mutual contact. No response. Corde wasn't interested in validation from a man who once told him to give up, and now he didn't need it. The next morning, interviews poured in. Requests, offers, praise. But Corde turned off his phone and went for a walk. The sun felt warmer than it had in months. The air didn't carry weight anymore. He wasn't chasing anything now. The industry, however, had begun chasing him. Labels who once passed him over now scrambled to schedule meetings. Artists tweeted admiration. Producers offered beats, exclusives, even full projects. But for Corde, the performance had been the reward, not the stage, not the deal, but the moment he finally stood in front of thousands and let the world see the man behind the name, and the man was enough. After the festival, the offers rolled in like waves, some from major labels with long contracts and even longer promises, others from producers who once wouldn't return his emails. The money was real, the visibility undeniable. But Corde paused. He had climbed this far without compromising, and now that the doors were wide open, he wasn't ready to trade truth for exposure. Instead of signing, he built. From a small studio space in South LA, he launched his own label, Soul Seed Records. The name wasn't flashy, but it meant something. It was about planting what mattered and letting it grow slow, real, and rooted. His mission was simple: find voices like his had once been, raw, overlooked, silenced by industry noise, and give them space to be heard. The first artist he signed was a 19-year-old poet from Richmond who had never recorded a track before. The second was a bilingual MC from Boyle Heights who'd been hustling mixtapes on sidewalks for years. With every artist, Corde offered more than a contract. He offered belief, and as his label took shape, so did his next project. Not an album this time, but a documentary co-created with Nia Vale. Titled Between the Lines, it told the story behind the verses, the silence between the headlines, the rejection behind the resurgence. It wasn't about hype, it was about healing. Corde's following didn't just grow, it evolved. No longer just fans of his father or curious about the name. They were people who saw themselves in his story, misunderstood, dismissed, told to quit before they even began. He started giving talks at community centers, visiting high schools, joining panels about creative independence and mental health in the industry. Not for attention, but because he knew how heavy it felt to carry doubt with no place to unload it. Back home, Snoop watched it all with quiet pride. They still talked often, though less about music now and more about life, about purpose, peace, and how legacy isn't what you pass down, but what you pass forward. One evening, as they sat on Snoop's porch sipping tea, Corde asked him a question he'd been sitting with. "You ever regret not doing things your way sooner?" Snoop smiled. "Nah. Because if I didn't walk my path, you wouldn't have known how to walk yours." Corde nodded. He finally understood. His story was no longer about proving Trey Delano wrong. It wasn't about escaping a shadow or earning respect. It was about choosing himself, again and again, no matter who watched or what they said. He didn't need revenge. He had resolution. And now he had reach. As new voices emerged through Soul Seed Records, and Between the Lines picked up critical acclaim, Corde stood as something bigger than a comeback. He was proof that being underestimated isn't a curse, it's an opportunity. That rejection doesn't end a story. Sometimes it's where the real one begins. So if this journey inspired you, even just a little, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There are more untold stories, more battles behind the bars, and more legacies in the making. Don't miss a single one. And while you're here, click the video on your screen now to dive into the story of another underdog who turned pain into power and changed the game for good.